I'm going to try louder. All right, is that better? Yes. All righty, well, good evening, family. I asked Gloria if Dr. Nix and I could share some of our research based on our doctorate degree. And as I was thinking about what I wanted to share, in the meantime, I was asked to do a TED Talk. So I completed this TED Talk, and I want to share with you some of the things I shared then. But mostly I wanted us to share so that we can inspire. Because when I started my doctorate program, I started when I was 54. And someone asked me, they said, well, how old are you going to be by the time you're done? No, so they said, in 3 years, you're going to be 57. Are you sure you want to do that? And I said, well, how old will I be in 3 years if I don't do it? I'm going to still be 57, I just wouldn't have the doctorate. It wasn't easy, but it was definitely worth it. And we are from a family of educators, so I hope something I say today can inspire you. So, my studies are around suspensions. Children being suspended from early childhood programs. So, did you know that more children are suspended from preschool than kindergarten through 12th grades combined? In Illinois, 40% of child care centers suspended infants and toddlers. Those are babies who are still in diapers. Those are babies who have not yet turned 3 years old. And black children are only 18% of the preschool population, but they comprise nearly half of all preschool suspensions. And many of you in this room know this already, but I was one of those children. I was suspended at least 7 times a year from the time I started school. In our family, we laugh about that and we joke about that a lot. But what I learned during my studies is that it wasn't just that I was a bad kid. I didn't start school bad. I started school curious, ready to learn, very enthusiastic. And what I learned in my studies is that black children, especially those who are pretty smart, they get in trouble more than any other child in school. So my talk is really about what we should do, because when I look back at the things I got in trouble for early on, one of my first suspensions was digging a hole in the playground because I wanted to see if China was on the other side of the earth. And then I got suspended because I snuck into the boys' bathroom because I wanted to see how they peed standing up. And then I was suspended because I took all the baby doll's arms and legs off. But I wanted to see how the body parts fit together. But instead of teachers seeing me as a scientist, instead of them seeing me as a future geologist, instead of them seeing me as a person who might be interested in anatomy, they labeled me bad. And then I didn't disappoint. Because once I was labeled, I was stuck in that label, and it was very, very difficult to get out of it. So, when we look at childlike behaviors, what do we see? What do children do when they get mad? And we have some children in this room. They kick, cry, scream, hit, bite, throw things. They do all manner of things when they get upset. And it's because they've only been on the planet like 5 minutes, right? There's a baby in here that's been around. This baby doesn't even know it has arms and legs yet. A little 3-week-old baby we saw yesterday. And then we have the little baby who was dedicated to church today, who's just now beginning to understand that he has some power. He's looking at me like, what you talking about, people? But they don't understand how to handle these intense emotions, right? They don't get it. But they're going to respond the way children respond. Now let's look at what adults do when they get upset. Same thing. Kick, cry, scream, hit, bite. Adults do the same thing. while we can expect children to be children, what's our excuse? How many times have you seen an adult scold a child for screaming while screaming? Didn't I tell you not to yell in this house? Sometimes we scold a child for hitting by hitting. You hit your brother again, I'm gonna knock you out. And then sometimes we say some real crazy stuff to kids. Like, I'll knock all the black off you, right? Or I'll knock you into next week. And I know a lot of times we say that the Bible instructs us to spare the rod and spoil the child, but the Bible also tells us to provoke our child not to wrath, provoke our child not to anger. So a lot of my research is not on children's behavior, but it's on shifting our thinking to adult behavior. It's really shifting our thinking so we're not always focusing on how children are misbehaving, but really seeing how we respond to that behavior. Because so many times we fail to teach children how to behave. And you all know that I teach early childhood and I teach teachers how to be teachers. And I'm always shocked by how we expect children to know how to behave. If a child doesn't know how to do math, we teach them, right? If a child doesn't know how to ride a bike, what do? We teach them. If they don't know how to do math, what do? But if they don't know how to behave, do we teach them or do we punish them? We should be teaching, but most of the time we're punishing them. We're yelling at them, we're screaming at them, and it never occurred to us that we haven't taught them how to behave. Yesterday, what's the oldest baby's name? Dylan is the oldest? Dylan and another baby was playing with the trains, Thomas the Train. And one of the kids came over to Dylan and snatched the train out of his hand, because that's what kids do. And I stood there and I knew the baby just wanted the train. So I said, here, give me the train back. You want it? Yes. Then you have to ask Dylan nicely, can I have the train? And he said, can I have the train? And Dylan says, okay. And it was as simple as that. But in that moment there was a choice, because I could have yelled at the kid, don't you come snatch this train. Or we could use it as a teaching moment. Another little guy, and I don't see him today, he was mesmerized by my camera yesterday. And he kept touching it and touching it and touching it. It's a $1,200 camera, so it's not a toy. And I could have scolded him, said, don't you touch this camera. But no matter how many times I said, let's leave our hands on the table, because if you don't say it negative, like I say, don't touch the camera. But when you say that, kids only hear, touch the camera. They don't hear the don't. So if you say, stop running, they hear running. So you want to tell them what to do. So instead of saying stop running, you're going to say use walking feet. Instead of don't touch the camera, keep your hands to yourself. So I had to tell the baby about 10 times. But finally, I took his little hands and I said, do you remember what I said? What did I say about the camera? Keep our hands off the camera. And I said, then let's do that. And he never touched it again. Without any yelling, without any screaming. Let me just give you an example of what happens in school. Now, I told you I was suspended all the time. This is a little boy named Tay. Now what I do, I go into schools where kids are getting into trouble, especially little black boys, because they are suspended more than anyone. Not because their behavior is worse, but because they are targets. Please believe me when I tell you this. Research shows it over and over again. So this little guy named Tay, he was being sent home 2 to 3 times a week, sort of like me, right? His mom asked me to go in and find out what was going on with him. I go in the classroom and I watch Tavon. And this is what Tay did. The teacher said, okay, everybody, come sit on the rug, crisscross applesauce. Tavon runs to the rug and he sits perfectly crisscross and he wants his teacher to notice him. And he's looking at her, trying to get her attention. Like, see me, teacher, see me. She didn't notice. He's still sitting there and he keeps trying to get her attention. See me, teacher, see me. She didn't notice. And being only 4 or 5 years old, he got tired. And finally, he stuck his feet straight out in front of him and leaned back on his hands. And it was at that moment that the teacher noticed. And she said, Tavon, You're not sitting like a learner. Get up and leave this circle and go sit at the table. That's all she saw, was every time he misbehaved, that's when he got her attention. And you know how that feels? Some of you may not know it, but I know it. And I know it well because that was my experience. Later on, what she didn't notice about Tavon was there was a little white guy sitting right next to her, turning flips with his green shirt over his head. And she didn't notice. There was a little white girl sitting right next to that child with a little tutu on, twirling. She didn't notice. But every time Tavon made a false move, she noticed. And I'm sharing this with you not so that we begin to only blame the teacher, but when your child comes home and tells you they got in trouble, believe them. Because statistically, I'm not supposed to be here. Statistically, I'm supposed to be in jail. When you have been suspended as many times as I've been suspended, and I told you suspended, I didn't tell you the 3, 4 schools I got kicked out of. For me to stand here as a doctor is nothing but God's grace, but I'll tell you, my daddy, who threatened to kill me every time, girl, I'm just gonna kill you. But he believed in me. My family believed in me. And I'm saying believe in your children, because what you're seeing, the things that you're seeing on TV with the criminal justice system, it didn't start there. It started when these babies were 15 months old in child care. Our black boys are being kicked out of child care before they're 2, mostly for biting, which is what babies do. I had a mother call me because her 8-month-old was kicked out for pulling the teacher's hair. Who has an 8-month-old? You know they're going to pull your hair. You know they're going to pull your earrings. It's not vicious. So why are we kicking these black babies out of school? And one more thing before I hang up. I'm not going to go through all this. But children rise to the expectation levels of the adults in their environment. When you expect them to be good and you tell them how awesome and wonderful they are, they will respond.
Yes,
they will respond. We have to speak life into our children. We have to speak brilliance into our children. We cannot have nicknames like Knucklehead and Buster. We have to call them my baby genius. We have to speak life and truth into our kids. And we have to expect the best. And when they fall, and they will, my daddy always said, it's not how hard you fall, but how fast you get up. Tell them they can get up. Their mistakes are not the end of the world. No matter what happened to me, no matter how bad I was in school, because after I was labeled, I tell you, I didn't disappoint. I was, but I was always encouraged. I was never told I wasn't going to be anything or amount to anything or any of that kind of stuff. So, when your children come home, make sure you are checking yourself. And checking yourself means how are you going to respond? Because you can respond in a way that can damage, or you can respond in a way that encourages. You can respond in a way that, when we talk about spare the rod, spoil the child, that same rod, when we think about it in the 23rd Psalm, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me, is not to beat the living daylights out, but to comfort and to guide. And if we can also remember to provoke our child not to wrath, not to anger, that we can also, again, speak life into them and be encouraging to them, but it depends on how we respond to their behavior. And that starts with checking ourselves. So, remember one thing, behavior is defined by the person most annoyed by it. Some things get on your nerves that don't get on anybody else's nerves. My daughter's smart mouth got on my nerves, didn't bother my husband one bit. But every time she slammed the door, he became unglued. Slamming the door didn't bother me because that meant she was on the other side of it. So I didn't have to hear her mouth, right? So keep that in mind. And remember this child here, because this is the face of innocence. And our children come into this world eager and ready to learn. What we have to do is provide an environment to do just that. So we want to love them to death. I know we talk about babies being spoiled, but I don't believe that there's any way possible to spoil a child. I think that you just love them and love them and love them. And he's shaking his head like, But just keep it up, and I'll tell you, because I've learned, my daughter is 12 years younger than older than my son. I spanked her, but Clarence has never been spanked a day of his life. And there's a way that you can do that by loving them and guiding them. Now, I'm not going to tell you anybody how to raise your kids, but I do want to say that the world out there is harsh enough. It is a harsh world by the time they start childcare as babies. They're not given the benefit of the doubt. But at least in their homes, they should be. Believe in your child and encourage them. So that is my little spiel for today. So